Okay, this will be our last video for this chapter, and this looks at the idea of target profit. Now, target profit, again, let's just look at what we're really saying, right? And hopefully you'll see what's going on. I said to you that management accountants like to look at things like this: sales, less variable costs, giving them contribution, giving them fixed costs. So contribution minus fixed costs gives us profit. This is the statement. This is actually called a marginal costing statement. Now, from here on, it's just mathematics. If someone says to you, "Oh, I expect you to get a profit of whatever, this thing here," they'll tell you what. They'll tell you, "Oh, I want you to get a profit of this." They'll give you the figure. You'll be told what the fixed costs are. If you know what the profit is, forgive me, you know what the fixed costs are, and you know how many units you're dealing with, well, really, this is just you filling in gaps. It doesn't really matter. You could be asked, what selling price should it be? Well, it doesn't matter. We'll do an example in a second. But the key point is, when someone says to you to get a target profit, they're giving you this, and they're telling you to basically work backwards, and you just have to. It's really that straightforward. So let's do the example in your book. Now, I mean, we'll come back to the formula, but it's not a formula. It's just you thinking about what's going on. And I think it's better you initially do it like this so you know why you're doing it. So go to page 405, and let's do that example, page 405. And it's the worked example on target profit, and it tells you that Fluffy manufactures soft toys and is able to sell all that can be produced. It tells you the variable cost for each toy is £10. So I'm just going to start filling things in. £10, and it tells you that the selling price is £20. So that's great. Then it tells you that your fixed costs are £5,000 a month, and it tells you that how many toys do you need to make and sell to achieve a target profit of 2,000? Well, I've just filled in everything. If I need to get a target profit of 2,000 and my fixed costs are 5,000, well, excuse me, it means my contribution must be 7,000, right? I mean, that's it, literally, because 7,000 minus 5,000 gives me 2,000. Well, if my contribution is 7,000 overall, and I know that my contribution, if you like, per unit, 20 minus 10, it doesn't matter how you want to do this, really, it's up to you. The key point is you need to get a contribution of 7,000. You have fun with your maths. You might say, well, Owen, if this is the total contribution, the total contribution for each unit is £10. So if the contribution for each unit is £10, I need to sell 700 units. Well, there's nothing crazy there. That's all you're doing, right? So you're going to do this. You're going to have 14,000, 7,000. So you're going to have sales of 14,000, costs of 7, and giving you a contribution of 7. And that's it. There's no magic to it. It's as simple as that. So in effect, what I've really done, so to speak, if you're looking for a formula, is to add my target profit to my fixed costs, right, which was the 2,000 plus the 5,000, and divide by my contribution by the 10, right? And if you like, that's what you can see they're doing over there. So sometimes you can see where it says on the very at the top of in the actual when we're talking about target profit, it says where it defines target profit being fixed costs plus target profit divided by contribution per unit to give you the number of units of output. It's not a formula, really. It's what it is. Number of units. So I suggest you always write it out clearly so you know why you're doing what you're doing. Right? And that's a very good way to do it. Do it this way. As you practice it, you get faster. You know what's going on. Okay, and then let's look at the second thing. The second thing is this question of the contribution to sales margin. I've already mentioned this. The contribution to sales margin, if you like, is the relationship between the selling price, variable cost, and your contribution. So it's a relationship between contribution and the selling price. Now, so for example, let's turn to page 406. Now, the theory here is, I mean, this is a ratio, isn't it? So you have for example, in this question, you have selling price of 20, variable cost of 10, and so the contribution is 10. So, I mean, remember, when we're assuming that the cost of variable cost does not change in itself. I mean, it's always going to cost you £10 to make the item. Well, we haven't changed this value. Every time you make an item, it's £10. Neither is the selling price changing. You're always selling it for 20. This is our assumptions. Break-even force us to make. But the contribution, therefore, must be 10 divided by 20. So the contribution to the selling price, if you like, is 0.5. Now, they like to ask interesting questions like, well, what's the revenue at break even if you have fixed costs of whatever? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the question is. If fixed cost, for example, of 5,000, they ask you questions like, what's the revenue at break even? Well, here's the thing. At break even, contribution, I'll say that again, at break even, contribution is equal to fixed cost, is it not? You see, because at contribution, at break even, when you get your contribution and you take away your fixed costs, well, profit is 0. So at contribution, at break even, profit is 0, which means that contribution must be equal to fixed costs. So if someone says to you, oh, what's revenue at break even? Well, and they must give you the fixed cost value. So if your fixed cost in this example is 5,000, well, 5,000 is also your contribution. Right? And if you know your contribution, and you know what the ratio of revenue to contribution is, because it's 0.5, it's what it is. It's basically saying the contribution is half of revenue. Well, therefore, it means that revenue must be 10,000. Right? And if you wanted to multiply this, or you just pretty much be saying, well, divide that by 0.5. So it starts to look like a formula, which it isn't. It says fixed cost divided by the contribution to sales ratio, but it's not really, if you can see what's going on. So don't learn the formula, understand what it is you're doing. Fixed costs at break-even are equal to contribution. You now know what contribution is. So you know the ratio between revenue and contribution. If you know the ratio between revenue and contribution, well, yes, you can now find revenue based on that ratio. Right, cool. And therefore, what we will now sort of finish off on is just look at the other points. They talk about some other points in that chapter. And there are a number of points that you must bear in mind. And I like this. Please highlight these. These are so important. Page 407. The key point here is this, that fixed costs must be covered. All of what we're doing here, we can't do if we're still thinking about fixed costs. Fixed costs have been covered. Please highlight that in different colors if you like. Fixed costs must have been covered. They're really separate markets, because if you think about it, we have the people who are helping us cover our fixed costs, and we have the other people we're selling to for less, but we're still covering up. So that's my variable cost there. So these are the people we sell to who help us cover our variable costs and our fixed costs. So we sell for much higher, but we sell for much less to the people we're helping. So these are one-offs. There are not many of them. Of course, the key point about doing marginal costing is to attract new customers. You can see that effect on we're trying to attract new customers. The key point is that we must be careful, because if in the long run we can't, then when it's time to forget marginal costing and go back to covering all our costs, we have to make sure they come on board. We have to make sure they're not upset, because we're going to tell them at some point this was only for a period of time, this was in the short term, and we're going to have to increase those prices again. And again, of course, people will use marginal costing to sell off older products. Think of products in decline. Think of where you are on your product life cycle. If you like, the final point I'll make is that even with this idea of penetration pricing, you might even start your business thinking, you know what, ignore trying to cover my fixed costs. I'll go as close as I can to the marginal cost and hope I can sell a lot. I hope I can drag people into my market and encourage them to stay with me. And then maybe later on you start to increase the pricing. So everything we've said is very traditional, but we could even start marginal costing. If the idea of marginal costing can happen right at the beginning of the business, if you like, you can just focus on the marginal cost. Yes, you are at risk of not breaking even early. Of course you are, because you're not getting a high price, but at least you're gaining market share. And if you're gaining market share, at some point you'll have the customers and hopefully you'll be able to increase your prices. Okay, great stuff. So that brings us to the end, if you like, of chapter 21. And of course, I'll be sending an email for you to do all the questions at the back of chapter 21. And then we'll start our revision strategy. Thank you.